Now let's welcome Patrick Raymond, Research Director at IDC, who will share expert insights on how agentic AI is revolutionizing procurement from intake to intelligent insights.
Well, welcome and thank you everyone for joining, depending on where you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Patrick Raymond, Research Director for Procurement and Enterprise Applications at IDC. And today I'm going to be talking about agentic AI, and specifically how it applies to procurement applications and its impact on certainly intake management and the intelligent insight that can be drawn from leveraging agentic AI. I think it's important to, as we approach this topic of agentic AI, to kind of level set so that we understand what it is and how it is distinct and differentiated from Gen AI. Oftentimes, Gen AI and agentic AI will be used interchangeably. And so it's important to distinguish between the two. So if we think back just a few years ago, the topic of the day in the procurement application space certainly was ESG. But that all changed in November of 2022 with the introduction by OpenAI of ChatGPT, this first open Gen AI conversational model trained on LLMs to leverage to generate this conversational human-like response. And since then, of course, that's been a very profound and impactful release. And there are several others since then, Mistral and Google Gemini and Anthropic Claude, Perplexity, Grok AI, et cetera. And things have moved so quickly to where we're at the point now where kind of the next evolution would be the agentic AI platform. So at the highest level, it's useful to think about agentic AI as being predictive and forward-looking as opposed to Gen AI, which is more a response to prompts to leverage LLMs to that kind of more a reactive experience. So I won't read the definitions to you, but agentic AI is differentiated from Gen AI in that it has that predictive element. It is autonomous. It supports informed, intelligent decision making and leverages certainly Gen AI to pull together a very complex set of inputs and data to provide that forward-looking task execution, whereas Gen AI commonly is predicated on the input of prompts from a user to generate some type of data response based upon what the user has input. So it's just important to, as we approach this topic and think about it, and I'm guilty of it myself, is sometimes people will interchangeably use agentic and Gen AI, but they are two very separate and distinct things. Now, if we consider agentic AI with respect to intake management, this is another topic area that is certainly prominent in the procurement application space. Intake management is not unique and simply specific to procurement applications, but in the context of procurement applications, it is that process of receiving some sort of input or request to generate some action based upon that. And so there have been a host of providers that are providing this intake solution, and certainly both point solutions and full S2P suites that are leveraging that to provide this intake experience that essentially is the central front door, if you will, to drive activity and accomplish tasks in the context of procurement. And some very common ones, I'll dispel the notion that intake is all about raising a requisition. Well, certainly it can be used for that, but it's much more. And so I've listed some tasks here that maybe aren't commonly thought of as intake management task, but it certainly does apply to these types of tasks. And so the first one being bid evaluation and negotiation strategy to leverage historical data spend analysis to conduct this playbook, if you will, to automate this very complex and can be time consuming process of evaluating inputs to a bid, to an RFX event. And not only that, to go the next step further and to develop, again, based upon historical data and optimize for some user-defined objectives that a user wants to accomplish in the course of conducting this bid, to formulate some sort of negotiation strategy that serves as a playbook going forward to actually execute then this RFX event. Invoice matching, three-way match, that's certainly not a new concept that has been with us for quite some time. but it's leveraging platforms that can then go the next step further with respect to learning from past anomalies. And very critically is conducting that supplier outreach and communication, and to do that in an autonomous manner such that it alleviates the need to do that in a manual process. So it provides tremendous efficiency gains with respect to adjudicating, resolving, and also learning, so that these anomalies can be detected earlier and autonomously corrected going forward. The last task, tremendous efficiency gains here, are the process of identifying those areas to operate more efficiently. Could be for cost savings, supplier rationalization, risk mitigation strategies, but to identify those opportunities where there's some type of an anomaly, or there's this very large supply base that perhaps can be rationalized, or leveraging historical data to say that we know that spend levels in a certain area seem to be abnormal, and to diving into that and surfacing that in a persona-based manner to identify those opportunities that can be leveraged going forward. Certainly with another great use case, broadly, I'll just say is repetitive tasks. So I've broken this down into data classification and data validation. At the risk of repeating myself, to do this in an autonomous fashion, obviously this can be a very intense manual effort to go through the classification process. So leveraging agentic AI to classify vast amounts of data, which will include supplier information, purchasing records, leveraging marketing trends. This type of automation does not only speed up that process, but can also ensure consistency and accuracy in categorizing data. It provides for enhanced spend analytics by autonomously classifying spend data. An agentic platform can be very leading edge in identifying cost savings opportunities across multiple categories and suppliers. With respect to data validation, this gets into at the point of data analysis before it even can begin to ensure for accuracy and consistency. So data validation is essential for ensuring that the information that is entered into the procurement system is accurate and consistent. So automating that process such that that's a task we can start with. We know that the data is accurate, consistent, obviously critical for anything that we want to accomplish in the procurement space. And then the last thing I'll touch upon is risk mitigation. Historically in procurement, it's been a very static process. Suppliers respond to a set of questions in a spreadsheet. Those will be scored and then filed away. And maybe that will be refreshed a year later. So inherently very inefficient. But moving forward, this is autonomous. It can be real time, and as importantly, the platform can surface those potential risk events and take the next step of suggesting some mitigation strategies. Agentic with respect to intake management, there's the benefit of prioritizing tasks. Very important because in a given organization, you multiple lines of business, multiple geographies. Well, their processes may be different. Some may require a contract to be in place before you can even onboard the supplier, right? Or others may have that onboarding process as the absolute first step. But having a platform that understands policies and procedures and rules, it can apply those autonomously such that the user, the procurement practitioner, knows that, as we're conducting our processes, we know that our rules have been applied and the agents have done that such that we know that this is compliant with our processes. Sourcing execution is another very opportune area with respect to ensuring that the overall objectives are adhered to and we have that collaboration across all the stakeholders such that the cadence of sourcing events ultimately leads to and drives towards the overall goals and objectives of given project that could have multiple different sourcing events that are necessary for the conduct of that sourcing event. So I'm going to speak broadly of the benefits that accrue to procurement through leveraging agentic AI. And this first item that I list it's a concept, and I'm going to give credit to Zycus here because Zycus came up with this concept of autonomous orchestration. And to me, this is where everything is going because it layers in the autonomous benefits of the agentic platform in an orchestrated fashion that coordinates across the lines of business and stakeholders to ensure visibility and compliance with an organization's objectives. So I think we're going to see much more talk going forward about this concept of autonomous orchestration, because quite frankly, that's where we see all of procurement applications going. I referenced earlier the idea of ensuring compliance with an organization's policies and procedures, and this can be done in a very automated fashion. I also have referenced the proactive risk management capabilities with respect to agentic AI platforms. And it's so important that these potential risk events are surfaced in a real-time environment, along with the companion suggestion mitigation strategies, and ensuring that collaboration with the suppliers and all the stakeholders. Sourcing optimization is not a new concept, but we think this is going to be broadly applied going forward as these tools make this available for not just the procurement practitioner, but for any end user that needs to conduct a sourcing event. And one of the greatest attributes with respect to sourcing optimization is that the user can define those goals and objectives and the attributes that are important to the user that they want to accomplish with respect to a given sourcing event, whether that's savings or sustainability metrics or geographic locations of the sources of supply. All these things can be optimized for. And then lastly, and just very broadly, this idea of operating more efficiently to enable procurement practitioners and those line of business end users to accomplish tasks without the historically, which has been the very data intensive manual work to validate information and conduct those supplier notifications. These things can be done via the platform such that the practitioner can work in a much more strategic manner. So I made reference to this earlier, but we see all of this moving towards this truly autonomous platform that not only leverages historical information, but layers in that predictive, informed intelligence, decision support capability that leads to this concept of autonomous orchestration. In the procurement space, broadly, three categories of spend. I'll just briefly touch upon these. And most commonly, procurement applications have been directed towards the indirect side. And the reason that the direct space has not received the level of capabilities with respect to procurement applications is quite frankly, it's much more complex and more difficult, because now we have to layer in all of the manufacturing ERP and the demand planning and forecasting and all of the supplier management functions. So we haven't seen the agentic approach to direct yet, but we feel certainly that is coming. Indirect, very common. That's where most procurement applications are directed, where most procurement practitioners work. The last category is tail spend, and in the procurement space, we've been talking about tail spend for forever, it seems. And I think 10 years from now, hopefully we're not still talking about tail spend. Tail spend is relevant because it's just difficult, because you think about the scope and scale of the number of suppliers that an organization conducts business with. It's just difficult to maintain that relationship with all of the suppliers that you're not necessarily working with frequently and are less strategic. But leveraging an autonomous platform, an agentic platform, it can facilitate that communication and maintain that contact with them and give them a voice and give them visibility. So we are very hopeful that the tail spend management function can absolutely be very positively impacted by agentic platforms. So, where do we see this going? This is our idea. It raises a lot of questions. It'd be a great topic for another webinar. But you think about the outlook. We think there's going to be a segmentation of the actual agent type based upon the type of work and the output for those respective agents. And so we break it out into these areas. Perhaps this will be how it breaks out, perhaps not. But at the highest level, there will be agent types. So there will be that primary agent for interface and communication with the user. That's the communicator. And then there has to be something to ensure that things are happening in the proper sequence, and they're flowing properly, and they're conforming to the goals and objectives, and they're compliant with the organization's policies and procedures. So that's kind of the idea of supervisor type agent. And then you have that formed intelligent decision support, or the advisor, the consultant. Think of it that way, of suggesting alternate ideas or suggesting optimal approaches. And again, ensuring that this aligns with the organization's objectives and just providing kind of that what if analysis of if you make this decision and you go down this path, these are the implications, and this is the input, and this is the expected savings, the example may be, or this is how it impacts this line of business, et cetera. So that's kind of like that idea of this advisor agent. And then inherent to all of this is the validation and accuracy of the output, of the advice, et cetera. And so that's kind of the quality assurance type agent, or maybe the checker or QA of ensuring that the data is valid and that things are happening as they're supposed to. So this kind of this QA function to ensure that we are conforming to industry norms and geographic norms, et cetera. So that's that type of agent. And then the last one is going to be much more task specific. So this could be any number of things you need to raise a contract, or you need to onboard a contractor, or we simply need to push through approvals, right? So that's this idea of this worker agent or worker approach that's going to be much more specialized and can be leveraged for specific tasks. And one very promising area here is that an organization or user will have needs that perhaps a workflow or an agent is not yet available. But we expect that the agentic platforms will be highly customizable and allow users to string together even a number of agents to perform a given task, so that this can be customized and developed to meet the end user's needs as needed going forward. So it's going to be very interesting. And the impact of the procurement practitioner is, perhaps the role transforms and the practitioner is kind of an agent supervisor, if you will. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to watch this all unfold and develop. So I hope this has been beneficial for you, and I kind of very quickly here provided some thoughts on agentic AI in the procurement application space. We are just at the very beginning, and we look forward to watching it all unfold, and appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for these comprehensive insights. I see a somewhat practical question from the chat that I think is on many people's minds. How do we measure ROI, the return of investment, of implementing agentic AI in procurement?
I don't want to sound like I'm avoiding the question, but my answer is actually not to suggest we have these magical new metrics to assess the ROI of agentic AI in procurement, because we think those common traditional procurement KPIs of time to raise a PO, savings, how many FTEs per PO, time to approve. We think those traditional procurement KPIs will be the most effective going forward to assess the ROI of agentic AI platforms in procurement. And that is to say, to study and assess and get the trend line for, and now we are leveraging this agentic AI platform. And what is the impact on these traditional metrics? From that, they can be scored to show this is the impact to what are we spending to conduct procurement activities, and how has that been impacted? And what we're spending certainly includes the cost of that agentic AI platform, but it's just an assessment of those traditional procurement KPIs and to get a view for how they've been impacted via leveraging an agentic platform. We would expect that we're going to see procurement practitioners can be much more strategic, and the time to, for example, run a sourcing event or develop a category plan, those things will be dramatically accelerated. So we expect individual practitioners to be much more productive, their output to be much higher, and they're going to be much more efficient. So I'll repeat myself, it's going to be fascinating to watch how this unfolds, but we expect that this is going to be a tremendous benefit to practitioners and quite honestly for the organization at large.
Thank you, Patrick, for bringing clarity to this transformative power of agentic AI. And to all, while you're absorbing these insights, don't forget to download our executive Gen AI in Procurement for Dummies guide and our new white paper from the Resource Center. Also, please take a minute to give feedback about the event by clicking on the respective icon in our reception area.